Let's go, though, now to the issue of immigration. And in this area where the debate can often be hijacked by high emotion, let's get some indisputable facts on the table. The Albanese government confirmed in the budget last week we will increase migration in this country to June next year by 715,000 people. We've got around 73 legacy cases. These are the people who came by boat last time Labor was in power. Many of them won't go home. They're working their way through the courts, paid for by you, the taxpayer, or they belong to countries like Iran who will not take them back. Add all this up and you can see how much pressure is on the immigration system. Now, everyone who comes to this country has to be thoroughly checked, but we know too, from a secret report that the government's sitting on, that the visa system is in crisis. We're told a whole lot of criminal elements are getting people through the system. They're using it for human trafficking and more. So you've got to wonder why on earth you'd be bringing in this great big number of people at a time when the system is telling us it can't cope. Notwithstanding the fact that no one really wants to talk about Big Australia in Canberra because it is the sugar hit to the budget bottom line. But my next guest, not afraid to talk about it, business commentator at the Herald Sun, Terry McCrann. Terry, welcome. Immigration front and centre last week. This news today, of course, 16,000 asylum seekers by plane. That's an extraordinarily high number. You've got the 700,000 odd migrants between now and June next year. I know the government says if we hadn't have had COVID, we would have had these numbers progressively over this period of time. But you're looking like a python here, swallowing a basketball to bring this many people in this quickly in this financial year.
And let's not forget, Peter, that after the June year, there is going to be 600,000 plus in the next 2 years. So you're talking over 1.3 million over 4 years, and that's the target. But the way the system works, there's no way that the government can actually control those numbers. The numbers could in fact turn out to be much higher. You get people coming in on visas, short-term visas. They extend those visas, they change those visas, and they stay on. So no one really has any real sense of what the total number of migrants coming into this country will add up to over the next 4 years. But it's going to be a very big number. Now, this should not be rocket science, Peter. If you bring in 100,000 migrants, if you bring in 1 million migrants, there's got to be somewhere for those migrants to live at the most basic level. And at the same time, we're having this huge migrant surge. Our housing system, our housing industry is in crisis. You've got dozens, hundreds of builders going broke because they caught between the fixed price contracts they've signed and the massive escalation in the cost of building supplies. And you've got a rental crisis because we just don't have the rental properties in Melbourne and Sydney. I mean, this is a Melbourne-Sydney thing. Most of those migrants are going to end up in Melbourne and Sydney. It doesn't matter where they start, they will end up in Melbourne and Sydney. So, and then that's before we even begin to discuss the infrastructure issues that are raised by this, the roads, the schools, the hospitals, etc., etc. So, yes, there's been some sort of a catch-up because of the COVID period, but no one in the public service seems to have taken the COVID period when they were locked in their houses to actually think about this whole thing longer term and in a structured way.
Well, you and I both said we should use the pause that COVID gave us to have a proper population plan, a conversation with the Australian people, work out what our optimum number was and work back from that. But these guys, they got the builders in to renovate the house and no one's even thought whether they want to add on 1 room or 15 rooms, and they're all just going at it at different ends of the house, and the painter's tripping over the carpenter. That's what happens. But it's all about basically manufacturing a fraudulent bottom line to make the budget look better, and to hell with the people who have to live with the implications in the city, because they're not in teal seats. And I can tell you the migrants aren't living in Canberra. You're right, it's Sydney and Melbourne, and we've already got complexity with housing markets, and we've got issues with congestion. Let's talk about the latest round of wage push increases. 7% before Fair Work Australia. This is for minimum wage. We know the Transport Workers Union, they say, well, gee, we've got wall-to-wall labour, let's not waste it. They're going to put a big push in for aviation workers. We hear, and I think the number's 10.5 The Albanese government has offered federal public servants 10.5%, God help us, over 3 years. This is all, I presume, going to fuel inflation, Terry.
Well, Peter, the other part of that wage negotiation is that the unions want 20% and the Albanese government is offering 10.5. Are those the parameters? Are we going to get a result which will be somewhere between those two numbers? It's most unlikely that the government will be able to hold firm on the 10.5, excuse me, over 3 years. We saw the Reserve Bank minutes today. They came out, they explained the detail behind the decision 2 weeks ago to raise interest rates, surprisingly. And what those minutes told us is that we cannot really afford to run the risk of 4% wage rises. If you're talking because productivity is in the toilet, productivity is so low, and there's very little sign of productivity picking up. And if you're talking about wage rises much above 4%, you are going to see the Reserve Bank in its current form putting up those interest rates again and again and again, because inflation will be staying at 5-6%. So we've got a collision between an out-of-control migration program. You've got it intersecting with what is beginning to look like the beginnings of a wages explosion, because you've also got the 7% wage claim on the minimum wage as well. And that's going to collide with interest rates. And that's going to be a very painful wake-up call across the country.
And if you are a small business owner with a mortgage, God help you, because you're going to be hit with those wage increases. At the same time, you can barely afford your home. And we know a lot of small business owners have got their homes, their personal homes, on the line. I think we're in for a bit of a rude shock in the next few months, Terry McCrann.
Plus energy.
We will stay across it. Plus energy, you're not wrong, plus energy.